Good morning and welcome to Sunday Coffee. Joining me is the Honorable TK Eppley. Today, we're going to talk about nutrition labels. And specifically, when you look at a supplement, are you really getting what you're paying for? How to know the differences between what's good and things you should probably stay away from. I'm your host, Dr. Dan Ford, and this is EchelonOrchid.
Guess who's back?
Good morning, TK.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I am amazing. You like how you're the honorable TK for today?
I know. Last time I checked, I've never been elected to public office, nor have I ever sat on a judicial bench.
Yet. For those that aren't out there, the Virginia governor election's coming up in about 2 years. TK Eppley, write him in.
Oh boy. Yeah.
I mean, you can't do worse than the guy that was a part of the KKK.
Yeah. Great. I'm glad that's the standard we're holding ourselves to now.
Well, I mean, it's a standard.
I don't know. That's allegedly, though.
Well, isn't everything?
That's allegedly, right? I mean, we have the only doctor, MD, that is a governor in the United States, and he's wishy-washy on what goes on with the science behind the COVIDs.
Isn't it interesting? So, I was having some fun with, because you and I have talked about this. So Ted Cruz going to Mexico, and they're like, he's a leader. I'm like, no, he's an elected official.
Right.
All right. To me, if you're governor or president, then you should have some leadership, because especially with the president, because at some point in time, you're still the commander in chief of the military. Right. So you have to be
by definition, you have a leadership component. But like we've talked about before, the real power of the presidency, and to a certain extent in states, the governorship is the power of the bully pulpit. Yeah. Right. That you have. And how do you effectively use that? Right. And I think even in business, CEOs, a lot of their power, or a lot of how they can be effective is nuanced, right? And when you want to make things black and white like that, then the great things in life happen in the gray areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so. And we were getting. He's like, no, he's an elected official. I'm like, look, here's the job description for a U.S. senator. You'll notice something in here, which is a lack of the word leadership. Here is the job description for a chief information officer, like a generic one, like not something I made, something that's already out there. I said, you'll notice in line number 5, it says leadership, right? So a senator is just a representative for the state in DC, right? That's it. Now, and so of course they asked, which is actually a really good question. Well, Dan, would you have left to go to Mexico? Absolutely not. I wouldn't have. I if it was me, no, I'd have been in Texas. If I'm the Texas senator, I'd have been there doing something, handing out bottles of water.
That comes down to there's what's required, right? There's what is by position, by policy, whatever, what's expected, I should say. But in today's world, what's required is to show empathy, even if you don't mean it. Right. And that's really what they're out. Like, we're done as a nation, a lot of times, working with information and facts. And we value feelings now. People want their feelings to be heard. Did we lose you, Dan? Oh, there you go. You're at multiple cameras, and
I'm doing. I'm playing with the cameras. Got some stuff going on. Probably some angles.
Techno wizard. Yeah, but that's I think the thing. This is as much about him not understanding the optics of 2021 in the public eye, that he has to be seen to be empathetic. Right. Does empathy, is he not empathetic by not being there? We can have a discussion about that. But the bigger thing is he didn't register himself with the optics of what his opponents were going to say about him. He gave him an easy one.
Yeah. And for me, I'm like, all right, I honestly, I don't care that he went to Mexico. I'm like, did he do his job? Yes. Once your job is done in your own free time, you go do whatever you want. As far as I'm concerned, like, I don't care that he went there. I think that where it really hurt him is, at least as to what's being portrayed in the media, is that he lied about it. So if you're lying about something, that means you're ashamed. Right. Otherwise you wouldn't lie. I'd have been like, yeah, I went to Mexico because I wanted to go to Mexico and I can afford to go to Mexico. And every other person in Texas, if you have the means, go do so. But what I find even more interesting that no one's saying, which if I was a demonicrat, I would be going, hey, Ted, when you came back into the country, did you quarantine? Because he's not quarantining.
Right.
No one's saying anything about that. Forget the lie. Forget that he went to Mexico. Hey, you went. Now you're back. Why aren't you quarantining?
Did you see the article in the Wall Street Journal this week talking about how by April we'll have reached herd immunity? But that we've so far, not even, we don't even want to talk about it. And then in the same week that the White House is wanting to get Google, Facebook, and the CEO, Twitter CEOs in there and really put the clamps to them about what they're calling mis or disinformation, which effectively what the journal and other people have said are effectively saying, if you dissent or disagree with our plan of vaccinating everybody, if you think that herd immunity or any other thing other than wearing a mask is the correct course of action, we want to tamp that down. That to me is like, how I am. It's like, hey, let everybody talk, right? And if you're so afraid of what somebody is going to say that you can't make a great scientific argument against it, we probably need to listen to the other people a little bit. Right? That's the way I look. And here's the thing: if the people that espouse vaccines and masks and social distancing ad infinitum are correct, get up, show us the science behind it.
Yeah,
right?
What's really unfortunate is, okay, so we've got two different extremes. You've got communism as being the far left, and fascism, which many people would say, Nazis are on the far right. What they have in common is they want to silence any dissent. If you're a dissenting voice, you're to be silenced. And people should remember that. In communist countries, in fascist countries, you are silenced if you are not speaking the political party's message. And that is dangerous.
And I think in anything, right? In social interactions and business interactions, and there's a way to do things that I'm not telling people to go in and blow up the whole room, but in any interaction that you have with other humans, if if something is incorrect and you know it to be incorrect, silence is consent. And once you consent by your silence, you own the bad behavior as much as the person that is the purveyor of that behavior.
Yeah.
And that's in social interaction. I'm not just talking about politics. All right. If you don't like that, tough.
Yeah.
I don't care.
So the funny thing is this buddy of mine, as we're talking about these kind of things on Facebook, and I said, it's awfully interesting that you only want to point out when the Republicans don't do something well. So it seems like you're very one-sided here. And so he says, well, you're changing the story. I'm like, no, I'm actually not. I'm saying you need to apply the same standard. And that standard needs to be applied to all, not to just one particular political party, to all. And because I said, I fail to ever hear you say anything about communist Andrew Cuomo. I fail to see you say anything about Nancy Pelosi. I fail to see you say anything criticizing any Democrat. And said, and I, and I've been very vocal. I am not a huge fan of, the former President Trump. There were some things he did well, a lot of which I didn't agree with, and I'm perfectly fine saying that. I think what President Biden is doing, like, oh my gosh, like did you catch his news conference about his call with I did
not.
Oh my gosh,
Xiaoping.
Yeah, Xiaoping. No one should ever let Joe Biden do a fireside chat where questions are not put to him up front with a teleprompter. Okay, like he's got a stutter, and I get it. I mean, that's people have it.
You're not making fun of that, right?
Yeah,
you're not making fun of that. You're just talking about the content of what comes out of his mouth,
right? Because he has a stutter. That means there's a disconnect in the brain that allows him to think quick, right? But I will not say in any shape or form that President Biden is not an intelligent person. I mean, and I say to all those people on the Republican side, I'm like, okay, look, this dude was a public servant for 50 years. I'm not taking that away from him. He's done some good things.
Yeah.
He's also done some bad things, like all of us. Like we all have a good and bad. But you just can't. I don't understand why his chief of staff, when doing a fireside chat, doesn't ensure he already knows the question. And I'm hoping that's the reason for this. But he said in that CNN fireside chat that he will not speak out about the atrocities that are going on in China.
Human rights stuff.
Yeah. He's like, I won't do it because there are different cultures, and in their culture, this is normal.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm like,
no, you lost me, and I'm done.
I'm sure that's not what you meant.
Check, please.
I should say, I hope that's not what he meant.
Check, please. Well, I think it comes down to this. And again, we look at this on the national stage, but think about this in your interactions daily. People judge themselves on their intent. They judge people they like and love on their actions, and they judge those they don't like on their mistakes.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you're going to judge, and because everybody does, right? We live in a world where it's on a daily basis, whether you realize it or not, you pass judgment on a lot of things, and it's how you can get from A to B. But how am I doing that? Right? Am I doing it with humility and a lack of ego, which allows me to say, okay, I've got to judge myself by pick either what I did or what I didn't do, right? What I did bad or what I did good. And I need to judge the folks that I disagree with by the same metric.
Yeah.
That's not how you win political elections, though, and that's not how you win political points.
So when you become governor of Virginia, how are you going to run the state?
First off, I got to get my seersucker suit out and work on my foghorn leghorn talk, because that's how
So Jason's growing his beard out the way. So you actually never saw him with his big, like, wizard-like beard. Are you going to do the same thing?
No.
You going to have the big wizard beard going on?
I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. No, not at all. Never. Under no circumstance am I going to. The word wizard is going to be on my beard. I have a friend who is somewhat of a loose cannon, and he'll grow his beard, and then he'll like braid it and put all sorts of I don't know, metal crap in there, for lack of a better term, and it's to ward off evil spirits and things like that. I'm not doing that one either. So none of those.
I mean, not yet, at least.
No, right? Never. I'll tell you that. Dan, I've been on the planet for 155 years. If I haven't started now, I'm not going to.
So, when you, it's interesting because I still, my particular faith, and many would wind up saying that I'm a Christian, which I'm glad they say it and not me, because I kind of go, look, if you have to say you're Christian, then are you really? But my faith, and I do this quite often, especially when blessing the food for dinner.
You pray for me to be the governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Well, that's going to happen. You're going to be written in even if you don't do it. But, I pray for our presidents, and it doesn't matter. I pray for President Biden to make good decisions. It's a hard job, and I won't take that. I don't want to see any of our presidents. He's the president.
Well, if you're cheering the destruction or bad outcome of things that a sitting president does, you're cheering for the demise of the country. Right. And that's the bigger problem. It's like last week. Yes, Rush Limbaugh died. Is he one of the most polarizing people politically in the last 50 years? Absolutely. But if you were on social media, effectively being a cheerleader for somebody dying of cancer, please don't ever talk to me. You're a bad human being. Right? If you're wishing that somebody died because you disagreed with them politically, oh my God. Right? I can't even wrap my head around that. Right? There's no one on earth that I wish dies a slow, painful death in politics.
I don't wish death on really anyone, but
I am. It's just like, you're killing me.
Yeah, I'm curious about this though. What your opinion is, because I can't remember which politician has advocated for the flags to be flown at half-mast because of his passing. My opinion is, I would not do so. I would not advocate for,
because he's not a national political, he's not an elected official. He's not, military, all the traditional things. He's part of the noise, right? Even if you agree with him, he's part of the noise. He might be noise you enjoy. Right. It's like, some people love rap music. Some people love country music. And those crowds usually view the other's music as noise. Right. But it's still like
I agree. Country music is noise.
We like both kinds, country and Western. It's like, it's like the old joke about country music. You got to play the songs backwards so you get your wife back, your dog back, and your house back.
Yeah. And your truck.
And your truck. Right. But this concept, is there a certain segment of the population that views him as in a very positive light? Absolutely. Right. There's people now I've driven around and I saw recently when I was on the road this week, there's people flying the American flag on flagpoles upside down.
That's not good. I don't like that.
I mean, and for those of you that don't understand, that weren't gifted enough by the public school you went to understand, that means that they're saying the nation is in distress. Right. That's a bad thing. Right. When there's more than, and I saw more than one this past week. Right?
While I never had the privilege of serving, my family, all my family has been in service, wore the uniform. And I was taught at a very young age by my grandfather, who was pretty high up in the Army. There are just certain things you just don't do with the flag.
Yeah.
One, it doesn't touch the ground.
Nope.
If it does, it's got to be destroyed. And you don't fly that flag upside down. Unless you are given specific authorization, when the sun is setting, the flag comes down.
Right, unless it's properly lit, right?
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly.
What do you think about these neighborhood associations that prohibit people from putting a flagpole in their yards, like HOAs?
I understand them not wanting to put a big flagpole. For that's their right to do that. But for them, the ones that I really go is when you can't put it attached to your home.
Your home, right?
Right. That's where I have the problem.
I don't agree with the fact that you can't flag, because if you can put other flags up, like if you can put typically on Saturday afternoons people put college flags up for the college teams that they're rooting for and things like that. If it specifically says it in there, and this is my bigger problem with everything. If you're going to buy a house or you're going to move in there, one of the things you're going to get to see before you say, yes, I want to buy the house, is you're going to get to see the rules and the covenants of the homeowners association. And 100%. If you read in there, you're not allowed to put an American flag, and then you choose to move in there.
Horrible.
Right.
Because you're now agreeing
Right.
You're not going to be
by saying, here's the thing. I mean, you have the ability, and whether they do it or not, to line through that, initial it, and then say, I'm signing it, but I'm not going to abide by that. They might come back and say you can't, but you're having a discussion. There's discourse. And a lot of people think, and this is for a lot of different things, because I want it that way and you hurt my feelings, I'm just going to do it. Right. I mean, there was one where it wasn't in the homeowners association when this guy built the house, but a new company took over management. I can't remember where it was in the US, and they added it and they made him take his flag down and kind of post. And I'm like, okay, that's wrong. Right. When he bought into a certain rule set and that rule set changed. Well, there was no restrictions on how you could paint his house. So he took the flag off and painted the front of his house like the American flag.
Good.
Right. I mean, like this is the lunacy that we go to in America. Right. But
absolutely. Yeah.
That's, I understand what homeowners association's intent was, but it doesn't, again, it's like, hey, people from 100 miles away trying to tell me you pay my mortgage. I've said this because we have, an HOA in our neighborhood. And I said to the guy that views himself as the nominal dictator of that organization, you're the reason we can't have nice things. Right. And what it's done is I live in a very small, almost gated community, and it's, we've gotten to the point now where neighbors have came and went, and we have great neighbors to where in our cul-de-sac, we can have a party, we can think, but we used to have neighborhood fun and everything. And the kind of, there's, you look at the kind of the rules, and you can apply rules by figuring out, hey, here's everything you're not allowed to do, or here's the maximum extent of things you can do. And I think when you especially start talking locally managed homeowners associations, people take their idea of what the perfect home should look like, and it usually is reflected in theirs, and they want everybody else to be the same way, right? Without difference. And that's, that's with me, and it's like, as an American, like we need to just do more celebrating our differences, right? And less saying we all need to be like, okay, great, you don't like the guy's front door, tough. You're not paying his mortgage. Get off my lawn.
Yeah, right? I mean, when it comes to HOAs, I mean, I understand the intent. Like the intent is to all right, everyone's grass needs to be cut. Like,
well, the intent is to maintain value of the homes. That's right. That's the only intent.
Right. Absolutely. And I'm perfectly fine with that. Where I get in, because one of the HOAs that I had to be a part of, they really didn't like it. And I, funny me, to hold the HOA accountable to their own words. So I was in a brand new home community, and it said that everyone's fence, if they're going to put one up, needs to be the same. Well, my fence was the first one that went up. Therefore, that should have been the standard. Right. Now, and with that is, if you're going to put a fence up, you also had to get your neighbors to agree to it. And so they did. And I don't remember the exact terminology, but basically the fence that I had was, it looks like in every other board was done on each side. So it looks kind of like a pallet in a way going across. Right. So we're at HOA, and there's someone's fence is going to be put up, and it's not that. And I said, well, the bylaws say this. Well, I didn't, and so the president of the HOA happened to be my neighbor. Well, when I signed off on yours, I didn't realize that's what it was. Well, that's your fault, not mine. Yeah. The HOA bylaws clearly state that all fences have to be identical, and you're authorizing one that's not. Now, that can only happen is if we're going to change the bylaws. And so in order to do that, we have to have a quorum. We do not have one. You can't authorize this to be done, right, without changing the bylaws. So, eventually they change. Eventually they change the bylaws, but
it's mom and pops wanting to feel like they have some everything in life. The older I get, the thing is, people want to feel some measure of control, right? And if they don't feel it within themselves, they start trying to control other people, right? And I said that is, and at some point you try to be nice. You're just like, what miserable existence are you under that I don't see, to where everything that you talk about with with regards to this, to a neighborhood or to a situation where it always has to be negative and you always have to win. Right. And it's not like it's counterproductive. I mean, we had one of the guys leave. He wanted to pen this, big diatribe to like I said, the nominal person that thinks they're in charge all the time. And as to why he's never moving into another neighborhood with a HOA because of you and blah, blah. I'm like, he doesn't care. He's just glad you're leaving at this point. Right. So, you're a nice person. Don't ruin that. Don't ruin that by like giving him the satisfaction. Right. He knows he's a bad person.
Right. And this is another thing when you're talking about flags, because I actually saw this not too long ago. And this to me is even worse than flying the American flag upside down. And that is, if you're going to fly flags, the United States flag has to be on top. I have seen several times recently where another flag is on top of the U.S. flag. And I have a big problem with that. I mean, I mean, forget that. Okay, you may feel like the country's in distress. Really, and it's not. I mean, my understanding of the flying the flag upside down is that your base has basically been infiltrated, and that's your way of letting people know, hey, we've been taken over. That's my understanding.
Right.
Is that the correct?
That's how I understand it. I mean, if you, in terms of how you defend that, like, from a military application, it's about the time. Like, so you have what's called, when you release ordnance, you have what's called danger close, right? And danger close means, hey, yep, the enemy's at the gate and we know we're shooting, but there's a chance we could hit you. And you have to, as the leader or leader's radio guy, say, on my call, right? Danger close. And everybody has to acknowledge it. And then all the good guys have to hunker down a little bit and go, because in normal ways, there's mechanisms we use to how we release ordnance to mitigate it hitting the good guys and obviously keeping the bad guys at bay. And when it's that bad, I mean, you've heard stories in Vietnam where, they're basically calling in artillery on their own position, right? Because there's 200
broken arrow.
Well, there's 100, in a battalion, I think there's 180 people. My knowledge of all things Army is limited. But I think it's in that ballpark. And, they're getting overrun by 1,000 North Vietnamese. And these commanders are like, hey, we're all going to hunker down, hope we survive. But we're going to get rid of, we need to stop 1,000 people and we can't do it with what we have. Right. And those are very grave situations. And are we in that today? Nah. Again, it's political wins and how fast can you get things to twitch towards the middle a little bit, right? Yeah. And if it's on the wrong side for you politically today, wait around, it's going to go back.
So is this so growing up, I was always told, and I wonder, I've never really looked at the validity, but it's just reminding me of this, that underneath the flagpole of a U.S. base is essentially supposed to be a gun, one bullet, a knife, and matches. And I don't know if this is true or not, but basically, if you're the last,
I've never heard that either.
All right, so what it was said was that if you're the last person, you're to take down the flag, cut out the stars, right, burn the rest of the flag so they can't take your flag, and then you commit hara-kiri. You kill yourself. I was never apprised that was one of my duties while in the 20 years I served. Yeah, I was just curious. I was like, as I'm thinking, I'm like, this is what I'm like, is that an old wives' tale? Is that true that this is what's underneath the flagpole at a military base? If you're the last guy, or gal, this is what you're supposed to do. I mean, I get you don't ever want the enemy to be able to capture your flag. I understand that, right. But I wonder, I always wondered if that was,
If you're gonna put a gun down there, you might as well at least load it up completely.
Yeah, well, because I would prefer. Yeah, I would like to cut out the stars. I'll burn the rest of us. I can't do that, but I would want to go down, firing, not guns killing myself.
Right? Yeah. I think one of the funniest jokes I heard years ago when I was a young guy was somebody was like, aside from cleaning it, why do we learn how to take these guns apart? And one of the older guys is like, so after we run out of bullets, you just pick it up and throw pieces at the enemy a little bit at a time.
Yeah. Well, so one of my my revolver that I have, which is a Chiappa charging Rhino. This thing is so heavy. I'm like, well, if I run out of bullets, I could use this thing as a club.
You can beat somebody to death with it, right? Yeah, no doubt.
I mean, it's very fun to shoot. I go, well, and the interesting part is it's a 9mm revolver.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Because most of them are like 357, stuff like that. Right. And so, but this, I'm like, oh, well, I'm like, all right, I'll get this thing. I spent way too much money for it. I was like, all right, when I was originally training for IDPA, International Defensive Pistol Association, for those that don't know that, I was like, all right, well, I want to get good with the revolver. So that's, even though there is absolutely no way you can win any competition when you are going with a revolver versus a pistol, you get 6 rounds.
Yeah.
It takes too long. Like, you're not ejecting it like a clip. Even though I think they're called angel clips, but because you put in your 6 things and you can eject it and put another 6 in. Yeah. It's not as fast as a clip. Hitting that clip, hitting it, going, ejecting, going to get another clip and putting in. No, with the revolver, you have to eject this here. You got to eject this, and then you got
you have a 6-round speed loader. It's like old police style.
Yeah, you're not
speed loaders. Yeah,
you're not winning a competition because it's all based on speed and accuracy. I mean, I could get the accuracy.
I'll tell you what, the guys and girls that do those 6-shooter competitions, it's amazing.
Oh yeah,
how quickly like when you look at it when they're going head to head with that type of thing, that's it's a level of practice that goes on with that and they're good at reloaders themselves, because most of them unless you're sponsored by Winchester, you're not you can't afford the bullets it takes to become that good.
Well, especially today, I was looking at the price for 9mm. It's almost $1 a round.
Really?
Yeah,
gravy.
It's cheaper for me to buy my for my one pistol, which is a 10mm. It's cheaper for me to buy 10mm ammo right now than it is 9mm.
Really? I mean, that's a complete role reversal.
Yeah, because when in the beginning, or not in the beginning, 3 years ago, 9mm ammo was about 22 cents a round.
Yeah.
Now it's almost $1. That's insane.
Oh, no.
That's what pandemics do.
Well, yeah, it's there's a lot of crazy behavior, that happens. I'm across the board, right? You see, there's just like I said, the last couple of years of just there's things about humanity I've seen I've never thought I'd see in my life.
Or well, is it that you never thought you'd see, or you never thought you would see on U.S. soil? Because I mean, you've seen some pretty horrible things being in.
Well, I think when you start talking about America and you start talking about the ideals of America and what kind of we stand for, or what we supposedly stand for, and again, I think it's we've fully embraced our feelings in a lot of sense, instead of saying, hey, what are the facts? What are they, and how are we going to do this rationally, right? And I think that drives behavior in a great fashion, right? Because when you're telling me, whether it's climate change or the pandemic or anything, when people stand up and go, the science is settled, it's the most ignorant statement ever, right? Science is never been so. There's always there's something on the horizon of breaking thing. And do I think that we need to tend to the climate and not keep inflicting damage? Absolutely. But the U.S., and this is like when people get in their feelings and then there's facts, is the U.S. and since they left the Paris Climate Accord in 2016, has kind of led the way in reducing the carbon footprint of the nation. Is committed not to build another coal-fired power plant, but those power plants, in number, are being built in China, in India, and they're building them at a rapid pace, right? And most of the coal that comes out of the ground in America goes somewhere else now. The natural gas is the next step towards towards cleaner energy, right? And is it in increments? Yes. Does everybody want to feel like we've solved the problem today so they can stand up in one house of Congress and say, look what I did, so they can get reelected again? Yes. But when you're saying we're going to total the economy to achieve a goal that we have no, and when you get Lurch, John Kerry standing up there saying we have 9 years before the planet, it defies common sense.
Well, it's interesting when you talk about the science settled. There are science has laws that have been settled, like gravity.
Right, 9.8 seconds per meter, 9.8 meters per second squared. It's the law.
Right, because, right. But there's other things are not, and specifically when it comes to the environment, it's definitely not settled because there's so many ways in which we can go about corrective action. Which I'm still, when we were talking, kind of, it reminds me, we were talking kind of in the pre-show, you testing for to basically go be a nuclear scientist, in my opinion. But why do you
worst idea ever?
Yeah, why do you think that people in the United States are so against a nuclear power plant? It's supposed to be the most efficient and the safest.
Right. Doesn't fit the agenda of flowers and solar. And I think in Texas, we really got a good dose of wind power, right? What that can be, right? Or what it can't be right now. And I'm not saying that it can't be there, but I personally think if you got to pick between solar and wind right now, solar, because of the ability to storage ability of PVs now, photovoltaics, for those people that aren't into this thing, that has developed so much in the last 10 years that outside the base, one of the bases here, they've got a huge solar field in it. You can't do anything with that land because it's right in the flight path of a runway that all the fighters land at. So it's basically, it's a crash zone, right? And it's a what if zone, right? So they come in and that literally, it's probably 200 acres is now a PV field. And they're getting great results with that. And it's not like Nevada where it's sunny 330 days a year out here. It rains and everything else, but the storage capability is there, right? And I think if you combine that, let's in residential, like when you're building new neighborhoods now, you could build solar into the neighborhood, have the power grid pipe in through the field so that it's basically supplying energy when it's needed in excess. But you have to build all the homes to an Earthcraft standard or a smart home standard where they're, you want to look at cars. Like we want to get better gas mileage. We have to engineer the cars better to get it. Like otherwise we'd still be having, 454 V8s that we're getting 5 miles to the gallon. Right now I've got effectively a twin turbo 4-cylinder car that's got 350 horsepower and gets 30 miles to the gallon on the highway.
Yeah, right? that's my Mercedes, right? I've got almost 400 horsepower, and I'm getting 30 miles a gallon.
Yeah, and so we're getting really good at engineering those.
Well, at least the Germans are.
Right. Well, I got a Swedish car, so they're doing the same thing, right?
We'll say Europeans then, because I'm not sure we're doing this in the United States.
Well, I think when you look at a lot of the American companies, and now a lot of the American companies have some measure of ownership by international, Chrysler is owned by Fiat Group and others. And so there's global investment in a global space. One of my favorite stories about cars is, how we sell a car and what's important to a car owner in the US is demonstrably different, for example, as to what is in India, right? Because the road system is different, people's desires and needs are different. And so the American brands have typically not done well in India. Well, Ford hired a guy and he went over there and he figured out what was the thing. It was cost of ownership is the most important thing to Indians. Well, with the road system and how they drive, there's a lot of trade and paint in India, as we say.
It's 100, 365 days a year of NASCAR for everyone.
Right, but it's not totaling accidents. It's scrapes and rubbing, right? Rubbing is racing, right? Yeah. And they are doing that. So what Ford did was to lower the cost of ownership is on the doors, for example, you can lift that exterior door panel out. You don't have to replace the whole door, right? And so they came up with innovative ways to be competitive. And then what did they do? What faith do the Indians celebrate for the most part? What's the national animal like that's of great religious significance? The cows.
Cow. Yeah,
they would have cows at the dealership to bless the cars, right? And they say, and that's when Americans in general stop thinking like ugly Americans when you traverse the globe, is when you can have great success. And I think globally we're looking for ways to be, well, actually, unless you're China, right? Because China's belching crap into the atmosphere at a breakneck pace. And this is where I think the climate people think that us being part of the Paris Accord is going to help, when actually it does nothing. They're going to do what they're going to do, and they're going to encourage us to take drastic draconian measures because it further financially puts us in a hard spot, right? And for somebody like John Kerry to stand up and say that, 2 years ago, AOC said it was 13 years and we were done. Now he's saying it's 9. I'm going to tell you why it's not. And I heard this from a guy named Dan Payne. He's a billionaire. He's an obnoxious human being, but I think he cracks me up. And I'll watch anything he puts on TV or on YouTube because he's an F-bomb laden tirade in a box with a fancy suit, right? And he was in Australia, and some lady stood up hysterical because she was completely into her feelings about the globe and warming, and you're killing all you rich people are doing this. And he's like, and after he told her to sit down and she wouldn't shut up, and then he told her to shut the F up, and we got through that circus, he said something that absolutely shut everybody in the audience up. And it was this. He goes, the reason I know that climate change is not a serious thing as you think it is, and that the world's going to be done in 10 years, is because if I buy a home, if we say the 10 feet, that's the one, everybody, 10 feet rise in sea level in the next 10 years. He's like, if that were the case, you would not be able to insure one home within 100 miles of the coast of the U.S. He goes, and if they would, there would be caveats in the language to the insurance policies. You wouldn't be able to get a mortgage for 30 years. You would have to get a 9-year mortgage to buy a home. All right. He goes, none of that's the case.
There would be no more Mardi Gras.
Well, there wasn't this year anyway. They didn't, and I liked it. They waited. They let all the tourists come. They let everybody do everything, and they canceled Fat Tuesday so that they can virtue signal and everybody feels good about themselves. Yeah. Well, why do you want to cancel Fat Tuesday? Right? And think about it. It's the day that we stop having fun and we start to introduce faith into the reason behind Mardi Gras.
Yeah.
Right. And you're asking people to make Lenten sacrifice for those people that, believe in that. And that's a thing. Right. And so I think that's funny. Right. But when you start talking about climate and global thing, it's like we've done more in the last 10 years to clean up. And I'm starting to really believe, like, especially when it comes to, petroleum products, that it's just, we're raging against these petroleum companies. Right. And it's how do you talk about profit, right? When you talk about profit with a petroleum company or an energy company, you say, oh, they did 40 billion in profit last quarter. If you talk about a small mom and pop company and they're doing really well, you say they did 20% growth. Well, that 20% growth might be $100,000. That 40 million or $40 billion of profit that the energy company had is probably somewhere in the 4 to 6% growth range. You wouldn't invest in that, right? In the short term, that's not a short-term investment. Like you're executing a Warren Buffett strategy to buy and hold, right? Because that's how you're going to make money over time with energy. Energy exploration is hugely expensive, right? And to say now that we, in the last 5 years, we have at our hands a complete way to be energy independent from the rest of the world. And by the way, when we buy fossil fuels from other countries, we primarily do it buying from countries that hate us. And we're paying other countries to hate us. Right? Period. Right? And so as you say, we want to move into the 20th century, we want to be cleaner. I agree. And I want to go on that glide slope. But I also want to do it in a fashion that doesn't all of a sudden dump 10, 20, multiple trillions more dollars on the debt. Because eventually that's going to be a bigger crisis than whether we're getting a suntan or not, and at what rate we're getting a suntan.
I wonder. So, I mean, I've made no bones about taking on debt as long as you can afford the debt payment, but because you want nice things, right? I mean, so you in order to do that, sometimes you got to take out debt. But at what point? And I think and I haven't looked at the numbers recently. I think we're pretty close to not being able to afford the payment.
I don't know.
Then what happens? But what happens when we can't?
What percentage of the GDP we're at with our debt right now? I'd have to go look it up. I don't know. I think some days I just don't want to feel really sad, so I don't go and look at that. And think about this: we went from ostensibly a balanced budget in the mid '90s to where we're at today.
It's insane. I mean, you're talking about like our debt has grown at a rate which I would be willing to believe that most companies wish they had a growth in their revenue at.
Oh, no doubt. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, no. And yeah, they do some pretty awful things to get there, right? You base yourself in a certain way to get to that level of revenue generation.
I almost want to, I bet you we're if we looked at from the mid 90s to now, it wouldn't surprise me if we were at like 20% year over year growth in our debt as a country.
I wouldn't. But think about it. Like if you look back into the mid 90s when President Clinton signed all that legislation, the country got on great financial footing. We can argue about politics, right? But the country got on great financial footing at that time with what occurrence? Republicans in the House and Senate and Democrats in the executive branch. And magically, they worked together to have a positive outcome, right? Period. I mean, and that's I don't think that's up for debate, right? That at that time, in President Clinton, because you're the president, you always get all the credit, and you also shoulder a disproportionate amount of the blame, right? And he does deserve the credit for walking into the room and being willing to negotiate and being willing to say, I want all of this, but I'll take this to get where I want to go. Now, was it part politics because he wanted to get reelected? Absolutely. But you know what? I don't care. He's the president of the United States, and whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, the sitting president should want to get reelected, right? You want him to want to have that job, right? Because if you just go there for one term and you're out, like you're asking for chaos in the system, right? Especially if you're able-bodied and everything. And he wanted to, he wanted to be there a second term, and whatever motivated him, and then whatever, because the Democrats had basically lost the House for the first time since 1954, that the contract with America was the contract with America. Certain parts of it were softened, and there was Newt Gingrich, was Speaker of the House, exercised a certain modicum of a restraint to not steamroll a sitting president, right? And say, we're going to make the country better. And he knew, even though they both gave each other credit and they both, at least tacitly hugged each other, gave you the big high five, and we're both doing it, but they went back to their own political basis and said, we won. And they did, right? That's the problem today. Right? It was the problem the last 4 years. It was the problem the 8 years before that, is that you have, Tulsi Gabbard, she was talking on Joe Rogan about being elected as a freshman and showing up. And she's like, you got freshman orientation. You sit there for a day or two. Here's where everything's at. Here's the rules. Here's all the paperwork you're going to need. Here's how you get insurance. All the basic, HR day, right? Where you're joining the Congress, and here's all the HR stuff you need. She goes, and then immediately after that, Democrats go one way and Republicans go the other way. And then it starts, right? And she was told, and she goes, I'm sure that they're told on the Republican side as well, that, look, we do stuff to win. We don't do stuff, we do stuff to help Democrats. We don't, thing. And so you start this separation of, we're going to be on either side of the aisle, and it's about a net sum game, right? And energy and what we do with the climate is the same. And the more we get into our feelings about it, and we don't look at a balance sheet, we don't look at anything, and all of a sudden, hey, how much is this going to cost us, and where are we getting that money from?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I looked up the numbers, now just because I don't have a problem making you sad on a Sunday. In 1994, we had a $4.6 trillion in debt, which represented from a GDP to debt ratio, we were at 64%, which for the most part, so we were in the 30s for quite a while, right up until President Reagan lowered our taxes in 86. But we were still good. We were still, then we got to like in the 60%. We were actually still fine all the way through Katrina and 9/11, right? As a matter of fact, even though we only went from, we went in 94 to 4.6 during 9/11 and even after Katrina, we're only at 6 trillion. All right. And now we're actually operating in the 55 to 57% ratio. Iraq war in 2004, we go up a little bit, 7.3 trillion. Now where the big jump occurred was after President Obama came into office and he started authorizing all these bailouts. We almost doubled. So when at 9/11 time frame, 2001, we were at 5.8. In 2009, we went to $11.9 trillion in debt because of the bailouts. And then, so we went from consistently being in that low 50s or high 50s to low 60% from GDP to debt
ratio.
Yeah. To 91%. And now we're at 136%. We're at $26.4 trillion in debt. It's really that we were pretty consistent, and then we decided as a country we're going to start bailing out people that fail, and then boom, the debt went way up, and that even includes bailing out, how we are with COVID.
Yeah, I mean, what are we at? 4 or 5 trillion now in that alone, right?
Yeah.
And it's no end in sight, right?
That's crazy. I mean, can you imagine? So that means, to me at least, we are not anywhere close to where we should be from our debt to GDP ratio.
No. Now I am sad.
Yeah, well, that's what I was trying to make sure you would be sad on this.
You did that. Now, mission accomplished.
Yeah. So, question. I'm not sure what my good friend Amanda Diana is asking. What should who have done? I'm going to assume President Obama. My personal opinion, if that's what Amanda Diana is asking, I wouldn't have signed it. Sorry, in my opinion, let the companies fail. I mean, that's capitalism. Someone else would have come in, maybe some private equity firm would have bought it for pennies on the dollar and turned around, General Motors, and Chrysler and all those companies. I mean, Ford Motor Company didn't take any money on the bailout. They seem to have done quite well. And as in terms of why was there no onus upon the president after to help it? I'm not quite sure. I mean, you just mentioned earlier, TK, the president gets all of the blame and all of the credit.
Right.
All right. No matter what it is. Actually, I would even go so far as to say I don't think any president gets enough credit for the right things that they did. But I think in this case, and even now, I mean, since 2008, our debt has skyrocketed because we have chosen to bail out everyone. And this is where I kind of do go and I kind of hey, I would benefit greatly if President Biden would wipe out the student loan debt. And I kind of go, as much as I'm against that, I go, well, wait a minute. If you're going to bail out all of these publicly traded companies whose sole purpose, and if you're in business for profit, your only purpose is
Generate revenue.
Right. It is for
Increase
stockholder value.
Right. Increase shareholder value.
All right. So if we're going to bail out these companies, then I go, well, then why shouldn't President Biden go student loans? Whatever's on the books right now, wipe clean. Right? I mean, even though I'm against it, I'm just as much against that as I am bailing out the banks. Hey, you made bad credit decisions. You know what people's credit scores were, and you chose to get in business with people where the debt, or rather with the potential that you are going to have to foreclose on these things. That's your own fault. Hey, General Motors, Chrysler, you name it. Hey, you knew what you were doing. Sorry.
Well, this is when I think if you look at the auto industry in 2008, 2009, when they went in and bailed them out, right? When Mullally took over as the CEO of Ford, he had come from Boeing, right? And so the aviation, commercial and military aviation industry, they are about stockpiling cash because they never know when there's going to be enough things. So he got there and they were perilously low on cash reserves. And so he set about to make some of those changes. He did everything up to include mortgaging the Ford logo, right? And when he went to DC, not only did he not take any money, he went down there to make sure that GM and Chrysler didn't get a special deal that would adversely affect him for not taking the money.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Right. And I, especially when you look at that, hey, right now, Ford should have been able to buy one of those companies, right? Just, no, we're not bailing you guys out. GM, Chrysler, good luck. Fiat, Chrysler Group, Fiat, figure it out, right? And GM, good luck.
Actually, did Fiat own Chrysler back in 2008?
Actually, I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not sure.
I think they wind up coming in.
Or was it Daimler owned them at the time?
I don't know. Well, yeah, it's a good thing we've got Google. We can always look this stuff up.
Yeah.
But I think the reason why 2014 is when Fiat purchased it. I think the reason is, and this is the Department of Justice likely would have blocked it because of too much power by one company. Just like the same reason they were trying to block why they did block the T-Mobile AT&T merger, and why they tried for so many years to block T-Mobile and Sprint from merging from
antitrust.
And the antitrust aspect.
Yeah.
But I kind of go, I would have permitted it because you have plenty of competition. It's not, you may not have an American company as much competition, but because you basically just have General Motors at that point, or Chrysler. One of them would have survived, I think, but Ford would have bought the other.
But it's you go back, the cry of the day for those people that can remember it was, oh, these companies are too big to fail.
Well, let them fail.
How so? Right?
My capitalist nature says you made bad business decisions, you get to fail.
Just because you were in business for 100 years doesn't mean you get to keep being in business, right? How many companies were original founding members of the New York Stock Exchange that are no longer there? Like, make up the Dow.
Yeah,
right?
the S&P 500, right?
Yeah, but how many of those 30 companies are still there?
Not that many. I think they're all gone now. I think they've all changed hands.
Is General Electric's not on there anymore, are they?
Nope.
No,
I don't think so.
They've all been replaced by 21st century companies, right?
I don't know why. I think Tesla joined there, and they shouldn't be. In my opinion,
I think it's whatever.
I don't understand why their stock is valued the way it is, because they are trading at like what I believe to be 100 times the projected revenue of next year. Like that to me says that that's not sustainable.
But here's the cool thing: like nobody's forced to buy that.
No.
Right? If you bought it on day one today, you kind of like the stock price, right? If it's today and they're telling you to buy it, I'm like, no, absolutely not, because I don't see a big upside.
Yeah, I mean, I am not a financial advisor, but I would say if you currently own Tesla stock, and I would be selling because it's at a high. I'm going. Oh, the only way I would likely keep it, and I don't actually think there's any reason that I would keep it. I would be shorting that stock all day long. And I did, and I made a decent amount of money when I shorted it, because it did drop quite a bit for a little while, because I know Elon is going to say or do something that's going to cause the stock market to pummel. Like, I mean, he's done it with Signal. All of a sudden, I mean, they're not a publicly traded company, but their subscriber base went way up. As he starts talking about Bitcoin, all that goes on. Bitcoin's trading at like, one Bitcoin today is like $56,000.
Right.
I'm about ready to grab my old computers and join in, and because I can just mine my own Bitcoins at this point. It'll actually be worth it to get a Bitcoin now and use up all the electricity just for $50,000.
That's correct. The whole thing just, I laugh now. Especially like, he goes on Joe Rogan, he smokes weed, stock price tanks. What does that have to do with Tesla? You know what I mean? What does him smoking a joint have to do with it?
Yeah. So Cerebus Capital owned Chrysler at that point. So yeah. So hey, thanks, Christopher. It's interesting because when I go back and of course we didn't even come close to talking about what we originally talked. This is the first time I haven't been able to get us back on topic, because this was more interesting, I guess.
Next week.
I just I wouldn't, if a company's going to fail, I just don't believe in bailouts. I don't think that's the job of the federal government.
No.
But I understand people's argument, and if we're going to bail out for-profit companies, why would we not bail out the American people? There's a lot of people that have student loan debt. And I don't go so, like, for those that say, well, I paid off all my student loans, or I paid for college out of my pocket. Well, you made a good decision. I mean, that's like, in the aspect of, if you're in the Christian belief, Jesus said he came here to heal the sick, not the healthy. Well, you're healthy, so you didn't need any healing. Right? That's how I look at it from that point. And while I can afford my student loan payments, it would be great if I didn't have to put out $3,000 a month for student loan payments.
Right.
I would love it. But I'm still against it. I'm against that. I'm against any bailout.
Now, and it's, again, because I'm in the position where I don't have to worry about it, so I'm not kind of following along so grandly. I tend to say, hey, if you part of the, whether, and it's a micro, personal debt is a microcosm of how we treat the government. Like, you need to be able to manage your own finances, and if you incur debt, you need to be in a position. You need to have thought about it to be in a position to pay it off, which you've done, right? Mm-hmm. I think when you say, and this is with student loan debt, right? It's as far as I know, it's the only debt that you can't liquidate in a bankruptcy.
Correct.
By law.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, that's insanity. Mm-hmm. Right? Because what you're saying is, if you have tough times and, it's a mob hit, F you, pay me, right? To quote the immortal Goodfellas.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, the problem. And we made it real easy for 17-year-olds to sign for a lot of money before they've thought about the life decision that they're making.
Yeah. Do you think it's let's assume that the media is correct on this, that the predatory nature of how higher academia has approached this, when student loans became federally backed. I don't remember what year that was. I think it was done in the Clinton administration, which I think was a good thing, because now anyone that wants to go to college can. You just got to be able to afford the payment. But at that point in time, when I believe you started seeing universities, their tuition prices started to also skyrocket.
Oh yeah, because they knew they were going to get paid, right? I look at it this way: if you look at across the spectrum of potential student, right, and let's take a private school or Ivy League, let's take Harvard for example. Tuition's over $70,000 a year. Right. So you're in by the time soup to nuts on all that, you're into almost $500,000, $400 by the time you get out of potential debt. Well, nobody actually, except for maybe, some billionaire is paying, but he's putting up a new building, his kid's getting in there, however that works, right? But if you say, hey, I've got academically qualified individuals across the spectrum of wealth, from abject poor to the wealthiest people that can possibly send their kids to school. At Harvard, I think, and it's like this at most of the big private schools, I think Harvard, if your family's gross pay is under 80 grand and you get accepted, you go there for free.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so then there's a graduated scale to where very few people actually pay full price for tuition. Right. But the problem isn't they're paying full price. It's when you start talking about, so if the number is 80, if I'm sending my kid to school and I make 81,000, what do I get? Right? It's not full, but what is it? And so when you start talking about taking out student loans, I think it's one of two ways. One, it's the people that are right on that cusp and, the lower middle class are trying to get, if you're thinking like a parent that wants better for your kids, they're trying to get their kids to be educated in a way that gives them a leg up for the future. Right. And then when you start talking the middle class and upper middle class, a lot of times it's like, hey, you got accepted to the University of pick a state. Great education at a lot of great state universities, but they want the name brand, right? They want to have the name brand. So they're willing to they're willing to take out debt to say, I'm going to pay. And then what are you majoring in? Right? You've talked about this before, right? Every time that you've incurred debt for education, it's because you knew that financially it was going to be to your benefit and put you in a position to where your revenue, your income would far outpace the level of your debt, right?
Absolutely.
I don't think a lot of folks think like that.
Probably not. I mean, so if we put this into perspective, I spent for my MBA the same amount of money that I spent for my undergrad all the way through my doctorate. I doubled what I basically spent to get my MBA. Why? Because of the name brand, 100%. But it's also already brought me in a substantial increase in compensation that more than pays for that degree. And this is why I think Elon, when he says, hey, the problem with business is we have too many MBAs. No, the problem is we have too many MBAs that don't understand all of the teachings that they learned. They just went for one thing and one thing only, or one concept. The MBA is really an overall general management degree of understanding all facets of business, which goes from how do you do marketing, human resources, legal aspects, and then accounting and financial analysis and operations. I mean, that's what a good MBA encompasses, all pieces of a business. If you only focus on the accounting or the finance or any one of those pieces, if you only focus on one, you don't have a good business. And I would be willing to bet that Elon Musk is relying on a good amount of MBA graduates to make a lot of the decisions he's got going on with his companies and his personal finances.
What was it? Well, I think he says it best. I never went to Harvard, but I employ a lot of people who did.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think that's a great statement. Right. But I think, in life, when you start making decisions, it's how are you spending your money? Right. And what are you getting for your money? Right. And I don't begrudge anybody that wants to go learn art history or something that you can't. There's no tangible job when you get out. Right. I mean, you can spend $100,000 and go get an art history degree and make $50,000 a year. I can go take a 10-week course at a community college in Network Plus, basic server admin or whatever, and get out and go make that same $50,000.
Yeah, and I think,
right?
I don't look down at the people that did a liberal arts major. I mean,
I don't either, but what's your expectation of being able to pay that debt back? Like when you think about yours was a well thought out argument. A lot of people they like you said, not all debt is bad. They incur debt because they understand the revenue that they can make by having that degree will far outpace the debt and the debt payments.
Yeah.
Right? If you do it because, hey, I love this, but it's going to take, you have to live with the bad position you put yourself in for the love of what you decided to do.
Which is perfectly fine. As a matter of fact, I would go so far as, a lot of liberal arts degrees help people to think, and that's great.
I agree.
I would go, what's your next plan? Like, are you okay? Are you going to go, what graduate degree then are you going for in order to be paid for your undergrad, or, certifications, whatever you want to do? If I could go back in time, I would absolutely love to have my undergrad be in philosophy. I would absolutely love that.
Right.
Matter of fact, that's why I read a lot of, philosophy.
That's why you read a lot of comic books.
Yeah. Well, not so much anymore, but they're just not as good as what they were back in the 80s. But that's why I read, Rousseau, all of those of that, classic, aspect of how we think. And so those art history, or not art, I wouldn't say art history, the liberal arts majors, they get to think quite well. Just what are you going to do next? And I'm perfectly, I don't want to have to pay if I'm the government. I don't want to pay for other people's mistakes. I don't think that's the role of government.
I don't either. I think that's a great place to end.
Yeah.
Because next week this is how we're gonna get it. Next week we're gonna talk about nutrition labels, nutrition facts, and what the government says is healthy versus what sane people actually believe is healthy for you to consume.
Awesome. All right, my friend.
Little teaser for the GP.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, my friend. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
I hope you have a great week. Talk to you later. Take care, everyone.